Hi, everybody, and welcome in from the waiting room. Just having a look around, see who we've got. Hello, everybody. We've got lots of people on today from the UK and from around the world for our conversations with a mediator, our series of conversations with practicing mediators, all about the breadth of application of mediation skills, the breadth of application of interpersonal mediation. There's a new face on screen who is Danny Williams. Say hi, Danny.
Hi all.
And Danny is one of our affiliate mediators. He's going to talk about his own background and skills in a second. And as I've done with all of these conversations with a mediator, we'll prefer to hear from the mediator rather from me. Probably stick a hearing from me in these webinars. So we'll get talking with Danny in just a moment. Just to say before we start, thank you for joining a little bit early there and just having that couple of minutes silence. We're just recognising VJ Day, 80 years ago today, shockingly, that the surrender in Japan took place to bring an end to the Second World War. So that was 2 minutes silence just to recognise people who went out there and bravely put themselves in the way so that we could all be sitting here having these conversations. So over to just before we go over to Danny, the chat box there on the right hand side. If you're joining us live, you're very welcome to comment, question, chip in, ask or say anything you like there. I'll try and deal with it as we go along. We've got Scott online as well, keeping an eye on things there. If you'd like to contribute, please pop your hand up and I'll come to people in order. If you're not sure where the hand thing is, down the bottom of your Zoom screen there, there's a react symbol with a heart, and there's an up arrow. With the up arrow, you'll see a hand appear. Just click on that, and that will put a hand up in your little square on the Zoom screen, and I'll come to you in turn. Okay, so we've got the chat box, we've got the hands, we've got Danny. So Danny, tell us a little bit about you, being sort of your background, how you got into this. Just sort of start from the beginning, and let's hear all about Danny Williams.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks UK Mediation for inviting me. Yeah, so I've kind of my history in kind of conflict and resolution is I worked in education for quite a substantial part of my career. I started out in kind of pastoral care roles, so I was a mentor, and then I became like a head of year. And then I was kind of supporting the leadership team around some matters. But then eventually became kind of sucked into the safeguarding world. And by the time I'd kind of finished working in education, I was a director of safeguarding for a big mat trust in Birmingham. So I was working there, but part of my work in that was managing staff welfare, dealing with conflicts in departments. But kind of my history of working in education was managing young people, managing parents, supporting a lot of external agencies. So being kind of the lead person around supporting Ofsted where it came to safeguarding matters or any other external agency that was involved. So quite frequently when you're kind of managing safeguarding concerns, you're liaising with LADOs, you're liaising with children's services, and you are kind of working with a lot of different external agencies that are supporting young people, or in my case, supporting staff, because that was kind of one of my main responsibilities in education.
Mm.
And then 4 years ago, 5 years ago now, actually, I left education and then I started as head of safeguarding and compliance for England boxing. Um, in that role, there was quite a lot of conflict, as you can imagine, in with it being a combat sport. But then there was kind of a lot of conflict around community, managing areas, and then kind of there was quite a little bit of conflict in managing the expectations of the board, and kind of making sure that they understood our responsibilities. So it's kind of managing that. And then more recently, I have moved to UK Athletics as head of safeguarding. Um, and I'm using my kind of conflict resolution skills and my
Mm.
mediation skills quite frequently already,
Yeah.
to kind of manage new situations, and manage quite a lot of not failings, but things that need to be improved
Mm,
within our communication to our membership and
mm,
to our community of coaches that I'm working with.
yeah.
So
Okay.
that's kind of where we are. I completely,
Fascinating,
yeah.
fascinating journey. And some of the reason we enjoy having these conversations just to illustrate the breadth of experience of our mediators and the breadth of application of the sort of interpersonal mediation skills. So, just two things I want to mention just before I ask you a question. First one is a MAT trust, just for anybody who doesn't know, is multi academy. So it's a frequently used model for several academies within a trust, several schools within a trust. What's a LADO, Danny?
So it's local authority discipline officer.
Oh, there we go.
So
Okay,
they work with adults that have an accusation against them.
gotcha. No, okay, fine. So right back to the beginning then. So in terms of working in education and in pastoral support when you sort of director of safeguarding, what kind of conflict would you come across in that setting, Danny?
So frequently at that point, it was dealing with young people who were having friendship issues, that might be having issues with the teaching staff in the school. Um, but then quite frequently, because of the kind of demographic of the area that I was working in, there would be a lot of conflicts in the family home.
Mm,
And then trying to kind of break down those barriers for the families to enable the young person to come into school and feel supported and cared for in the setting. So um, often having to kind of do home visits where I'm mediating a situation between two parents quite frequently, and then also how that's impacting the young person. So having to kind of use skills around conflict management, interpersonal mediation, really, to make sure that it enables the young person to to move forward.
okay. So quite, how should we put it, high temperature conflicts, particularly looking at what's going on in the family of the child who's maybe bringing some of those issues to school and acting out. Possibly getting into conflict with teachers or with the organisation, and you're sort of really diving into that and actually going to the family base and to the home and then trying to address conflict between the parents and the child, or even between the two parents.
Yeah, it's quite frequent. You try to, you kind of step in an education role, especially in a pastoral role,
Yeah.
and you want to ensure that people are feeling safe, feeling supported, but you're going a little above and beyond. So, school regulations would kind of mean, look, you go to the home, just quickly make sure the kid's okay, and then you bring them home, whether you bring them into school. Um, but you kind of want to make sure that they're not stepping back into a negative environment when they leave the school setting.
Yeah.
It's not perfect. You can't always say that you've done that and you know that by the time you've left, but then you feel like you've had some impact in that young person's life and the family's life.
Yeah, sure. And this, if I'm not wrong, if I'm not mistaken, Danny, that work would have been before you trained with us as a mediator. Is that right?
It was, yeah.
So
Yeah.
how did you do it without training? Where's this inherent Danny Williams conflict resolution skills come from?
Yeah, I think you kind of gain skills over time. So when you are working with people quite frequently, when you're communicating with people quite frequently, you have experiences that are kind of in your nature. Part of my character is I feel like I'm a very caring person. And I kind of want to solve problems for people quite frequently.
Mm,
So, kind of having that as a way of working and a way of my personality, though, that kind of was what drew me into working in education in that capacity.
mm,
And knowing that I would have the opportunities to go above and beyond were, quite good for me. That's why I stuck at it for quite some time.
yeah. So that sort of sense, your own compassion, your own wish to build bridges for people and help them to communicate better, plus a lot of practical experience of talking to a very, very wide variety of people around quite contentious issues, I would think, and around issues where you've got You got to think, hey, you know what, this needs patched up, and particularly as you say, with the child at school, we can manage what goes on between that young person and the teachers and its peers at school. But when the child goes home or young person goes home, if they're going into a war zone, then we're sort of taking two steps forward, three steps backwards, I guess. So,
Yeah, totally. Trying to be proactive in supporting outside of the school setting
mm,
kind of helps the
mm,
community, it helps the young person, it builds better relationships for myself, and it builds better relationships with the school that I was working in at that time.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I think it's quite a positive way of kind of looking into the world.
yeah. Okay, sure. So thinking as well about the sort of that, just staying with that setting for a moment, thinking about the kind of conflict. You mentioned Ofsted there in your sort of your introduction. So where was the conflict involving Ofsted there, like with between Ofsted and the schools?
Yeah, so by the time that I was kind of the director of safeguarding, at that point when Ofsted were coming into the school, it was either to complete an inspection or because a concern had been raised, and they wanted to kind of address that with the school.
Mm,
At the time, there was a quite a specific incident at the time where a concern was raised. We felt like we'd managed the situation really well. We were able to provide all the evidence and do everything that we needed to do. Um, but the response that we got back from Ofsted was quite challenging,
mm,
um, which is, kind of what you'd expect to see. But my leadership team and the board were kind of chomping at the bit to kind of respond in a what I would say is a more aggressive way than I thought was appropriate at that time.
mm, mm,
Um, so what I kind of suggested at that time was that we have a Teams meeting, and I kind of almost be the mediator in that, so that I'm able to kind of make sure that we're getting the outcomes that we want, but then we're also kind of supporting the outcomes that Ofsted are looking for.
mm,
And that was a really intense environment because, I'm almost telling leaders that people that are above me, look, we're not doing it this way. We're gonna go in, we're gonna mediate, we're gonna have some good conversations, and we're gonna open up and find out why Ofsted feel like, because Ofsted tend to be an organization which have really clear structure. So, we felt like we followed their structure.
mm,
Um, but it was kind of my leadership team understanding why they felt we hadn't dealt with it in the way that they wanted it to be done,
mm.
or why they had the level of criticism that they had.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Um, and that
Mm,
was a really good piece of work because it gave my leadership team and myself an opportunity to explain to Ofsted why we'd done it, how we did it.
mm,
And then by the end of it, we came to a good outcome, which was, Ofsted were pleased with what we came to by the end of the time, and
yeah,
my leadership team were happy about we had a better way of moving forward,
yeah,
if anything like that ever came up.
brilliant.
So yeah, it was
Yeah,
quite
yeah.
but it was quite an intense environment,
Mm, mm,
um, which
mm,
is unusual for me because I'm quite a cool, laid back person. But it
mm,
was even I found the tension of the meeting
yeah,
quite challenging, which was good. So, and it's interesting because I had a good use of a pause in those meetings and just
good.
a
Go
break
on.
in teams. So that was quite good actually. So it was quite positive.
Yeah, a good use of a pause.
Yeah, so just like a pause in what we're doing. So, take 5 minutes, step
Yeah.
away, and then kind of come back to with a bit of a refreshed headspace. So then
Mm,
I was able to do like a little bit of a catch up of what we did in the previous session,
right.
and then kind of come back to
Yeah.
how we kind of move forward.
Yeah. Okay. I've got a hand up and I'm going to come to that in just a second. But I just wanted to notice there with a mediator's hat on, you're considering the interests on both sides. You're ensuring that both sides are hearing the other one's motivations, explaining to us there why the school has done what it's done. And doing that in terms of it needs and interests, um, slowing the whole thing down, ensuring that the two sides are listening to each other, etc. So it's all highly consistent with a mediation approach and a mediation frame.
Yeah.
We had a couple of comments there. Mel Moore-Pryor, who is the person with their hand up, has said, is LADO not local authority designated officer rather than a dispute? Did you say dispute officer, Danny?
There's a variety
A
of
variety of
there's a
things, yeah.
variety of titles for them now. It depends on what authority you're in. They're changing the names quite frequently.
Which is what resolution space has said.
Yeah,
It is in my experience, but might be different between local authorities. So LADO is something like that. So
yeah.
let's go to you, Mel. You got your hand up. Let's hear your contribution. Hiya.
Hello, hi. Nice to meet you, Danny. Hello.
Um,
So I'm a national HR consultant for Juniper Education, and I was trained by UK Mediation December time. So I've been mediating this year. I just wanted to follow on from your thread, Danny, because I've been going into MAT schools, various different, sort of education communities, and safeguarding and the Ofsted being key with regards to their reports and whether they're getting outstanding or what it might be. So I had an interesting case where I was mediating between a family member and the CEO. And the reason was that the communication had got to a point where one of the parents, unfortunately, because the family had had a split, wasn't able to get the communication out of the school because of various different, kind of situations at home. But the key was the child. And because there was another 10 years to go, or there is another 10 years to go with 3 children within the family, it was vital that the parents could communicate with the Multi Academies Trust, and it was the CEO with regards to the mediation. So my experience, I just wanted to share it, have a chat about it, was that I went into the situation knowing that it was a bit of a hostile environment, really, straight away. There was a mention of some kind of level of aggression and various different things. So, that was before I got there. Demographically, I was aware that I might be a bit challenged, etc. So, anyway, the way I got into it was when I went in and said, "Listen, I am a mediator from with a really neutral position here. I'm here impartially." And I want to hear, like you said, Danny, from both sides of what you want to tell me. And I'm going to listen to both of you. And I use that pause idea as well. And I let them go away. And they really knew that when they come back, that I had listened to what they were telling me. And then I said to them, this contract is your contract for yourself, really. You're coming to an agreement. I'm not going to control the agreements. I'm not going to come up with the agreements. And they did come up with the agreements themselves on how they would move forward with their communication. And actually, it resulted in a really positive outcome for both the family member and the CEO, because obviously these people that are in the positions are in quite pressurized jobs themselves, and they want the best outcome for the child, and so does the family, and we have to think about that. So I think mediation in the education community is at the moment something that we need to push because it's invaluable. I think it's invaluable for families, parents, children, staff members, all stakeholders, really. From what I've seen, I've been in mediating in SLT teams that have broken down and they haven't been able to communicate effectively to move forward their teams because there's some kind of grievance or dispute that's happened with another member of staff, and that's held everybody back as a team. I've gone in, I've done it as a mediation training session, but they've come about their agreements themselves of how they're going to effectively communicate, because it's all communication mostly, isn't it? That's what we're talking about.
So do you find, sorry, Mel. So do you find, Danny, there's much awareness of mediation in the circles where you move? Mel saying about, we need to sort of increase the awareness of it really within education in all the different aspects of education that we've been hearing about so far today.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think mediation does need to become more of a preventative measure
Yeah,
in education.
absolutely.
I think where Mal's kind of working in HR, she's probably hearing about mediation at a really end point in in a process in education system at the moment. Whereas I think if we could get it to a space where it's more of a preventative measure, we wouldn't find ourselves, and definitely HR wouldn't find themselves having to deal with so many kind of mediation situations between staff and the school, staff and the mat. The example that she gave around a parent actually having to be speaking to a CEO is it's not very common.
Yeah,
So it
Yeah,
means that's been used more as a reactive tool
yeah,
rather than a proactive tool. So
yeah.
yeah, I think if mediation did become more frequently used in education earlier on,
Mm,
it would prevent so many concerns and
mm,
prevent, in education at the moment, there's quite a landscape around teachers leaving the industry.
mm,
yeah,
And
retention issues.
lots of retention issues
Mhm,
because, some stuff around communication, but some stuff around expectations
mhm.
that could be ironed out early on,
Yeah,
would have some impact in that area, I think. So yeah, I think there's definitely a space for it.
And
yeah, and
the
I
other,
think, sorry to
sorry, Mel.
interrupt you, Mike.
Just the other thing I was just one thing I wanted to draw out there was about you as an external there, Mel. And impressing on people that you're an impartial mediator and
Yeah,
having that extra layer to be able to assure people of the confidentiality and the impartiality. I think it's really,
hmm
really important. And I imagine, Danny, that might have been a challenge for you being on the inside, as it were. You've got the lanyard which says you're representing the trust, but
Yeah.
you're still having to behave in an impartial way that ensures that you're equally invested in both sides' interests.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is around setting out really clear expectations when you work for the company. You do have to set really clear expectations around what is your role in this environment. Because parents aren't naive to the fact that most schools will try to use internal people. But it's about showing that integrity and making them know this is what I'm here for in this environment. I'm here to support you also.
Yeah,
So it's about really having clear expectations around what you're there to do
yeah,
at that time.
yeah, cool. Okay. Thanks very much, Mel. That's really enriched our conversation. Thanks a lot. So it was really very
welcome.
interesting to get that different perspective and a nice little example there of where you've used the skills in a very practical way in education. Thanks very much for that. So
Welcome.
let's just move forward a little bit then, Danny, to you working with UK athletics. I think we've all seen horror stories in newspapers about inappropriate behaviour, particularly with coaches and coachees, I suppose, with the athletes.
hmm
And you're there in UK athletics, leading safeguarding,
hmm
and I guess with this and with other conversations we've had, I think a lot of it is to do with a culture change, more of a
Yeah.
culture where people find it easier to speak up. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, look, I feel like in competitive sports, so, I'm working for UK Athletics and the main team that we oversee is the Great Britain team. So, we're talking about really high-end, high-performance athletes who are mainly full-time athletes. So this is their job, who are working with mainly coaches who are full-time. So, they don't have additional kind of other things that they're doing in their life. This is their whole entire career. Um, that creates a really intense environment. It creates a really interesting environment around boundaries and where the boundaries lie. Because ultimately, a lot of the time, these are all just adults working with other adults. And they might be friends, or they might have friends who are kind of for in their coaching groups. So I'm in the process at the moment of kind of looking into what those levels of pressure are creating. So, what environments are they creating? Where does the conflict lie? Um, and then I'm in the kind of process at the moment of figuring out a way to work with both athletes and coaches to get them to understand and kind of manage those expectations, manage those boundaries, and feel supported both ways. You know, an allegation from an athlete about a coach, which might be, might be true, might not be true, can ruin a coach's career. Something that they've worked for, their entire life. And it's the same way for an athlete. An athlete, you know, having a conflict with a coach, especially a really well-known coach, can make it really difficult for them to have success within the sport. Because if they're seen as somebody who's difficult to work with or hard to manage, then other coaches aren't really prepared to work with those people. So it's about finding a way to make things as safe as possible for everybody to feel like they can be open, to be able to communicate effectively. And I've already had to deal with several kind of conflicts between world-class coaches and world-class athletes.
Mm.
And managing those situations is difficult, because you've also got then agents of coaches, agents of athletes. Then there's the expectation, and kind of as you mentioned at the start a little bit, is nobody wants the sport to be on the TV
Mm.
other than when it's just at an
But
event.
for the wrong
So
reasons, yeah.
yeah, so you've got to, there's also the kind of pressures around that. But really fortunately for me, and I suppose this is where the impartiality comes in a little bit for the athletics community, I'm really clear with the athletics community that I've never been an athlete. I don't I don't really understand the coaching elements of being an athlete. So for me, when somebody's speaking to me about it, they are speaking to me quite clearly. They are managing me. They're also informing me of how things are within the sport. So they're feeling like they're being heard and listened to, and that's really quite positive.
Mm. Okay, cool. Really eye-opening for me. I didn't know coaches had agents.
Yeah,
Uh, but there's a lot of hands on the table when you're actually, just trying to resolve conflict between a coach and his or her coachee. There's a bit more to it than meets the eye. Yeah.
yeah.
Nadine's just popped a comment up in the chat box. Nadine, say a little bit more about what you mean by mapping. Just if you do a further contribution, please. Just and then we'll come to your point. Tell us what you're thinking about when you say about mapping the conflicts. Um, Okay, so I guess, a culture where people can more easily speak up without there being any consequences to doing so, because as you say, it can ruin the reputation. And within such a closed shop with so very few players, I guess, in that field, reputation is everything. And there unfortunately is still this no smoke without fire supposition. So if somebody makes an allegation against a coach, it's going to stick, and it could ruin the rest of their career. And I think it's true outside of athletics, of course. And we know something that's come across my sort of feed recently is to do with the freedom to speak up within the NHS and the guardians that were appointed with freedom to speak up in the wake of the Taylor report and the Mid Staffordshire NHS inquiry from years ago. It's just been abolished. So just recently, as a cost-saving measure, we're no longer going to have the guardians' freedom to speak up guardians. There were flaws with that system. There were a few problems with it, but I think it's disappointing that we're sort of, I think we might be throwing the baby out with the bathwater there, because it was intended as a safe and confidential place for people to have a single point of contact within an NHS trust to raise issues around concern for patient safety or concerns for staff relations or concerns that could potentially turn into a complaint or even a court case. Try and nip things in the bud, as we're talking about today. And we had done training in mediation skills with a lot of the Freedom to Speak Up Guardians and the representatives within the NHS trust. So it feels like there's one less channel for people to be able to speak up. But I'm with your point as well about it being enculturated, that it doesn't just need a system or a particular email address that you can go to if you've got concerns, but that sense of it feeling sort of enculturated, whether it's within the NHS or within athletics or within education, that sense of it's normal to have difficult, challenging conversations, and you can trust. You can believe the promises that are made about confidentiality and about how your I suppose your whistleblow will be treated. I guess that's a lot of the work that you do, is it not?
Yeah, and I think part of everything that you've just spoken about there is about having more of a proactive approach to these kinds of things. So at the moment, I suppose maybe talking a little bit about what Nadia's mentioning is um, having really proactive education that's available where people can see what's going on, where people can understand what we're talking about. So when we talk about, raising a concern, having real education for coaches, well, in my current world, having real education for coaches, for athletes, for support personnel, so that they really understand what we're talking about,
Mm,
and having opportunities for them to be able to understand how things could impact people,
mm,
um, just so that when things do come in, everything that comes in is taken seriously.
uh,
But it's about ensuring that everyone quite understands what process they might have to be part of.
yeah.
But then also understanding that there is support out there for them.
Mm,
Um, I'm also doing quite a bit of work around training. So, where we have clubs, training for welfare staff,
yeah.
so that those staff can almost kind of do the pre-work around letting athletes know, letting coaches before they kind of step into the world-class program, what their expectations might be. So then when they do come into the program, it's almost quite normalized for them
Mm,
to understand that this is how things will
okay.
happen. This is what we'll
Mm,
what we'll do.
excellent. Yeah, and I like that idea of people getting used to that sense of a culture where people feel free to speak up, where they understand the impact of how a disclosure or allegation might actually affect the person who's named in that disclosure or allegation. That's interesting too.
Yeah.
But also believing by demonstration, believing that they will be trusted and that their allegation or complaint will be taken seriously, that every single report will be taken seriously. Because I think we know that people are often very, very reluctant to pipe up,
Mm.
whether it's about an interpersonal conflict as such in any setting, education, athletics, workplace, but also if there is a serious allegation, people tend to sit on those allegations, even when, again, back to high profile cases. I was just reading about Mohammed Al Fayed. Now there's about 140 allegations about Al Fayed. In his lifetime, there were a handful. Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody who's on today. But so all of these have come out of the woodwork now because they feel, okay, now I can speak up because I'm not afraid of repercussions.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid that I'll lose my job or be hounded or have legal action against me, as some of Al Fayed's accusers did in his lifetime. So anything that can encourage people to speak up more, anything that can help people to feel safer, any ways we can demonstrate to people that actually you will be taken seriously and there won't be any negative consequence for you actually piping up and telling your story or making your allegation. Back to Nadine. Nadine said, how are you going about mapping the conflicts? I think it's to you, Danny. Is there a process that you or your team follow in terms of mapping the conflict? And I asked Nadine to expand a little bit on that. She's talking about where the conflicts are in the relationships with the athletes and the coaches. So, where are those conflicts? I think you've said a little bit about it. Is there more to say about that, Danny?
Yeah, so I mean, we're doing a really active piece of work at the moment around getting the voice of athletes and getting the voice of coaches. So I'm now previously, we weren't necessarily spending a lot of time at events with people, and actually listening to them. I think organizations often do a really good job of having a survey, and I think organizations are really good at having a survey. And you get lots of really good input and data from surveys, but then when you actually sit and speak to somebody and you spend time with them, you find out a little bit more, I think. So we've set up there's two almost like groups now. So there's an athletes group, and a performance coaches group. And these are just opportunities for people to sit down and communicate around their concerns, their worries, but also to share good practice. That's really helping me get a better picture of where the problems lie, how they can be supported, where they can be supported. And essentially, most of the feedback that we're getting so far is that it's all interpersonal.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, athletes are concerned that coaches speak to them in a certain way. Coaches are concerned about how athletes perceive them if they're pushing them too hard.
Yeah.
It's all kind of interpersonal communication, being open and forthright. Um, but we've now got to find a way to kind of embed a better culture around actually, okay, have that conversation with the coach because it prevents the kind of build up over time
Mm.
of well, this coach hates me. Well, actually, they probably they really don't. But it's just about kind of building up that perception of it and actually understanding the external factors. A lot of these athletes that we're working with are lottery funded, so they need to get good results to continue to get their lottery funding,
Yeah.
which is their salary essentially.
Mm.
So it's about understanding some of those external factors, um, and then understanding how that might impact the coach also. So, because actually their athlete has got certain goals to achieve, and they feel a certain level of pressure to help them achieve that as well.
Mm. And
So,
I'm thinking as well now we're talking about how many different parties there are involved in the only bit that we kind of see is the coach and the coachee, but actually we're talking about agents, you're talking about funding now as well, so they might be lottery funded. I'm also thinking about certain athletes in certain areas. They've also got sponsors, like advertising sponsors and stuff like that. So there we've got another layer of interested parties, stakeholders, if you like, who might be involved in either the development of a conflict or potentially in its resolution as well. Mel's come back again and said about have cases been measured? Do we know what goes well? Do we have some indication of this working, Danny? Is it too early to say?
yeah, so it's too early to say at the moment. I've only been in the organization for 6 months,
Yeah.
well, 5 months, so we're just trying to embed some stuff at the moment and just to see how these groups go. And then, we're currently in the middle of a championship cycle. So, people's preparation towards the World Championships in Tokyo is it kind of distracts them away from the other stuff that might be going on because they're so focused.
Mm.
um, which is interesting because it obviously then creates more intensity around interpersonal conflicts.
Mm.
um, but yeah, once we kind of come out of this year's main cycle, which will be the end of the kind of World Championships in Tokyo, we'll have an opportunity to then reflect on where we feel like it's going, what's the impact of it. We'll have an opportunity to do some kind of one-to-one work with some of the athletes and the coaches to kind of see how they feel things are going.
Yeah.
And then we'll evaluate the program and kind of take some next steps.
Excellent. Really great. And it's all about dialogue building.
Yeah.
It's having the culture and the environment and somebody in the position where you are able to do this dialogue building. I'm guessing with the athletics that you've got case officers there as well, have you, working with the organisation? And are these kind of are they mediators in effect?
Yeah, essentially. So kind of everything that comes in at all levels. So anything to do with safeguarding in the whole of athletics, so not just world class, anything to do with safeguarding that comes into my team.
Mm.
And then they manage all those kind of cases, and they manage the interpersonal relationship issues, the relationship between the parent and the coach, the
Mm.
relationship between the club welfare officer and the parent, and all this kind of stuff. And so almost on a daily basis, we are managing some level of conflict. And they're having to use some of the skills that they've learned from me or some of the skills that they bought from their previous careers to kind of come in and manage those conflicts on a
Mm.
daily basis.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Brilliant.
ongoing.
Well, that's a real takeaway for me today, and I would hope for the people who are on today as well. Conflicts don't happen in a vacuum. There's always a context. There's always other people involved. There are other influences on why a conflict might develop, why it might deepen, and why it might fail to get resolved. And all of those parties, all those different shells, different layers that we've talked about there, None of these conflicts happens, and even some of the cases you've done for us recently, Danny. So Danny's one of our esteemed mediators on our panel. In the context of what you've been talking about today, sound a bit boring, the cases we've sent you on recently. There was one in a college, there's one in a university. You did a five-party one for us recently in a university. But even with those workplace sort of grievance type issues to do with, if I remember, there was some allegation about lack of managerial support in one of those, and
Yeah.
there's quite a bit. We haven't got time to go into them, unfortunately. But they didn't happen in a vacuum either. There was a context there. There was an influence of which organisation was involved, what the organisation was doing, other people who might have formed factions or taken the sides of, and particularly in the five party, I can imagine it gets enormously complex. So although we're just looking at the interpersonal dimension in dialogue building between a number of parties who sort of pop up in and make the mediation referral happen, there's a whole lot else going on in the environment and context from which that dispute emerges. So it's a real takeaway for me. I think we'll deal with a comment as a closer here. We try and keep these things to about 40 minutes, 45 minutes. We've got a comment from Alex. Hi, Danny. Is there just you in this role? Sounds like such a worthwhile, rewarding and challenging job, and one where you can really see the differences you're helping to make. So is it just you?
Yeah, so I am just me. It's just me. I am the lead person
You're the
in
guy.
the sport, yeah. But I do have a team of people who work for me. So they'll do certain elements of it. But it will be mainly myself who kind of deals with the kind of higher end conflict stuff to make sure that it's kind of done how I see best fit.
Okay, broad shoulders here. Exactly what we need for our panel. So
Yes.
brilliant. Well, listen, we're out of time really. So a massive thanks to you, Danny, for joining us today for this conversation with the mediator. It's been really interesting, and like I say, so it got me thinking about this idea about context and culture around disputes. Thanks ever so much for the comments and questions as well. It's great when people chip in. Loved it. To everybody, thanks for coming along. I hope you found it interesting today. Do join us again for our Friday webinars. We do about one a month. There's a whole list on the website. All sorts of things that we do for these Friday webinars. So thanks again, everybody. Thanks, Danny, again. And
Yeah.
we'll see you next time, everybody. Have a good weekend.